Number 9. Nazi statue in Uruguay. Back in 2006, a Uruguayan businessman named Alfredo Echegaray had a rare Nazi sculpture salvaged from the wreck of the Graf Spee, an armored ship that was scuttled in Montevideo after being damaged in a battle. The 700-pound eagle statue has a wingspan of 9 feet and is just one of a handful of known surviving examples of the Third Reich symbol. But the discovery was shrouded in controversy from the get-go because it's a reminder of the 9,000 Nazi war criminals who fled to South America to avoid prosecution after World War II. Echegaray argued in court that he spent $5 million over a 30-year period retrieving artifacts from the Graf Spee. It was ultimately ruled that he legally owned half the statue and that the government also owns half. The businessman accused Germany of pressuring the Uruguayan government to keep the controversial sculpture hidden from the public. He said that the German government has every right to bury an artifact from a dark chapter in history, but that it should at least pay him his fair share in order to do so. The art gallery housing the statue claimed that it was receiving offers for Echegaray's share of ownership, which is supposedly valued at up to $15 million. But the former head of the National Heritage Commission, William Ray Ashfield, scoffed at the estimate. He was one of several people who thought that the statue should go to a museum and be displayed in an educational but not glorifying historical context. Others wanted to see the Nazi relic destroyed. The battle appears to be ongoing. At last update, a court decided that the statue should be auctioned off, leaving many concerned that it would fall into the hands of neo-Nazis. Number 8. Missing aircraft. World War II entered its final year in 1945, and the fighting would continue for several months. While flying over the remote Indian Himalayas early that year, a C-46 transport plane vanished with 13 passengers aboard. It was en route from Kunming in southern China when it disappeared in a storm over India's Arunachal Pradesh. The plane was never seen or heard from again, until now. American adventurer Clayton Cools learned about the wreck when one of the passenger's sons reached out to him and asked him to search for it. Working with a team of guides from the local Lisu ethnic group, Cools embarked on a months-long expedition to find the plane. It was no easy feat. The group crossed chest-deep rivers, climbed to high altitudes, and camped in freezing weather. Even the experienced guides were uneasy about the trek, according to Cools, because 3 Lisu hunters had died of hypothermia in the same area in 2018. So it was probably a huge relief when the group finally found the aircraft on a mountaintop and identified it based on its tail. There were no human remains at the wreck site, which represents just one of hundreds of military planes that went missing in India, China, and Myanmar during World War II. Most are believed to have crashed due to severe weather conditions like ice damage and hurricane-force winds, according to Cools, who said that only some aircraft losses were at the hands of the Japanese. Would you make this kind of dangerous trek if you knew there was a chance of recovering World War II-era relics? Number 7. German hideout in Argentina. In 2015, archaeologists from the University of Buenos Aires announced the discovery of what they believe is a World War II-era German hideout. Nestled in the thick vegetation of Argentina's Teucuare National Park near the country's border with Paraguay, this site has long been associated with legends of secretive German occupation. Evidence to back these claims was finally unearthed when the archaeological team found fragments of a German-made plate at the site, along with 5 German coins minted between 1938 and 1941. Surrounded by 10-foot thick walls and a hilltop tower, the alleged bunker is big enough to accommodate 6 to 8 families. It's an extremely remote area that would have been extremely difficult to access in the first place and even harder to survive in. Argentina welcomed Germans from the end of World War II until 1955. Their post-war population in the country numbered at least 5,000 according to records that were found in 2012. But most of them lived in cities or on ranches, not in secret bunkers, suggesting that the hideout existed before Germans began migrating to South America in large numbers. Skeptics deny that the clandestine refuge was used by Germans, arguing that it was a failed homestead that was advertised as a German hideout as a gimmick for attracting paying tourists to the site. What do you think? Actual Nazi hideout or tourist trap? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 6. USS Independence wreck. The U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Independence served in World War II between 1943 and 1945, playing a critical role in the American naval offensive in the Pacific. The following year, it was one of over 90 vessels that were used as a target fleet for atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Codenamed Operation Crossroads, the project aimed to test the effects of a nuclear explosion on a naval fleet. Like many of the other ships that were used in the experiment, USS Independence was damaged during the tests. It was towed back to U.S. waters and docked in San Francisco while experts performed decontamination studies on it. In 1951, the Navy towed the vessel out to sea and deliberately scuttled it. Records of its location were imprecise and conflicting. One document indicated that the ship was 300 miles off the coast. Yet in 2015, researchers from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration found it just 30 miles off the coast near the Farallon Islands. They confirmed the wreck's identity using sonar imaging and by sending a remotely operated vehicle 2,600 feet to the ocean floor to investigate the site firsthand. The damage to the USS Independence from Operation Crossroads is apparent, but the ship's hull and flight deck were mostly intact at the time of the discovery. And as it turns out, the vessel was only partially decontaminated before it was sunk. There's detectable radioactivity at the site, and it's bound to leak into the water as the carrier continues to rust. Researchers are considering ways that they could travel safely to the site and retrieve parts of the wreck for further study. Number 5. Massive unexploded bomb. In 2019, workers who were tasked with deepening Poland's Piast Channel discovered a 6-ton bomb known as a tall boy. Designed by the British during World War II, the 19-foot-long explosive was found in one of the country's busiest shipping waterways. Tall boy bombs were among the largest weapons used during the conflict. Their effects mimicked an earthquake. The bomb found in Poland was dropped on April 6, 1945 during an Allied raid of the German cruiser Lützow, which was anchored in the channel. The workers reported the discovery and Navy divers were dispatched to the site. They soon discovered that the 12,000-pound bomb was unexploded. At first, authorities were unsure of what to do about the gigantic weapon. It had sat undisturbed at the bottom of the channel for 75 years and seemed like a non-threat to shipping traffic. Buried nearly 40 feet underwater, only the bomb's nose stuck out from the sediment. The waterway remained open while a crisis team met to figure out what to do. Finally, in 2020, a team of divers attempted to defuse the bomb, knowing that there was a 50-50 chance that it would explode. 750 people were evacuated from the area before the team tried using a remote-controlled device to burn the bomb's explosive charge without detonating it, a technique known as deflagration. Nevertheless, the weapon exploded, causing a huge column of water to blast into the air. Luckily, the divers were all at a safe distance and no one was hurt. Do you think that there are other as-yet undiscovered, unexploded bombs lurking in other European waterways? Tell us your theories in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Number 4. B24 Liberator Bomber. Located in the sleepy countryside of Sussex, England, Arundel is a market town with a rich history dating back to the medieval era. But archaeologists recently found themselves excavating a much newer site with help from military veterans. Dating back to World War II, it consists of an American B24 Liberator heavy bomber that crashed on June 22, 1944 after being damaged during a daytime air raid over France. 7 out of the 10 crew members aboard managed to escape the plane before it crashed, but the cockpit crew died in the crash after working to keep it stable enough for everyone else to exit. 2 of the 3 bodies were never recovered. The men are still listed as missing in action to this day, leaving their loved ones back home without closure and unable to properly grieve. One of the goals of the team that's currently excavating the site is to recover the missing remains and return them to their families. Veterans are assisting with the dig as part of the American Veterans Archaeology Recovery Program, which helps former service members cope with physical injuries and post-traumatic stress by offering archaeology as a form of therapy. Founded in 2016 by former U.S. Air Force captain and archaeologist Stephen Humphreys, the program has carried out 15 excavations. The program helps veterans who are struggling to find meaning and purpose in their lives while uncovering historically valuable artifacts and sites that help us to learn more about the past. Number 3. Maisy Battery Bunkers. Once the Germans were pretty sure that the Allies were planning to invade Nazi-occupied Europe, they designed and built an extensive system of defenses throughout their occupied territory. One fortification in Normandy, known as the Maisy Battery, was constructed in extra strict secrecy. It wasn't until 2006 that archaeologists discovered a collection of bunkers that formed part of the complex. The bunkers were found roughly 2 miles inland from Omaha Beach, which served as a landing area for the Allies during their invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, also known as D-Day. Josh Gates, who hosts the TV show Expedition Unknown, visited the site in an episode that aired a few years ago. He described the bunkers as fairly large structures with hallways and multiple rooms, staircases, adding that the site consists of 2 large bunkers with 3 to 4 rooms each. Armed with 14 huge guns, the 20-acre battery complex became one of the largest German defensive positions due to its proximity to the Normandy invasion landing sites. It was also part of a chain of defensive sites along the coast of northern France known as the Atlantic Wall. The site was ultimately captured by U.S. Army Rangers. After the war ended, Maisy Battery fell into obscurity for over 60 years, becoming covered with overgrowth and concealed by nature. In fact, the complex was invisible to the naked eye until its rediscovery. Researchers are still excavating at the site, eager to learn all it has to tell us about this dark period in world history. Number 2. A dedicated soldier. The Japanese surrendered to the Allies on September 2, 1945, officially bringing World War II to an end. But one soldier named Hiroo Onoda refused to believe that the conflict was over. He spent the next 3 decades in the jungle on the Philippine island of Lubang, relying on his guerrilla warfare skills to remain hidden and evade capture. Onoda was originally joined by 3 fellow soldiers, one of whom left the jungle and returned to Japan in 1950. Another one of Onoda's companions died that same year, and the third lived until 1972. In 1974, the lone warrior's brother and former commanding officer traveled to Lubang to try coaxing him out of the woods. By then, numerous government officials had tried and failed to get Onoda to surrender. Finally, after more than 30 years of living in the wilderness, he emerged from the jungle wearing his Imperial Army uniform, cap, and sword, which were in remarkably good condition for their age. Onoda formally surrendered to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, who pardoned the man for killing as many as 30 people who he mistook for enemy soldiers after the war ended. In a later interview, he explained that he thought Tokyo's pro-US government was scheming against him in their previous attempts to persuade him off the island. Onoda spent a decade farming in Brazil before moving back to Japan, where he created nature camps for children. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 91. Number 1. Munich Art Stash. The Nazis committed the biggest art theft in history, stealing around 650,000 paintings and other works during their reign of terror throughout Europe. Many were never recovered, but every now and then, some of these long-missing paintings reappear. In late 2013, German authorities found 1,285 of the stolen pieces of art at an apartment in Munich. They're collectively worth an estimated $1 billion. The situation started to unfold when border agents interviewed and searched an elderly, white-haired man named Rolf Nikolaus Cornelius Görlitz at the border between Munich and the Swiss city of Zurich. Officers had noticed the senior citizen acting nervous and flagged him for further investigation after finding an envelope filled with 9,000 euros on him. Strangely, the man had no records of paying taxes, receiving a pension, having health insurance, or having any bank accounts, yet he'd lived in a luxury apartment for over 50 years. Officials became even more suspicious when they realized that Görlitz has the same last name as Hildebrand Görlitz, an art dealer who helped the Nazis amass their huge cache of stolen artwork despite his one-quarter Jewish heritage. It just so happened that Hildebrand was Cornelius's father. Police raided the suspect's apartment and discovered a treasure trove of stolen art, including paintings by Renoir, Matisse, Picasso, Max Liebermann, Otto Dix, and more. Görlitz had clearly carried on his father's legacy of selling looted masterpieces. But he was never criminally charged because Germany's laws on the matter are ambiguous, and it's not necessarily a crime just to own a stolen painting. He passed away in 2014, shortly after the scandal broke.
Number 10. Capital of the medieval gold trade. In East Africa, there is an abandoned city that once controlled all gold trade moving through the region. It's called Kilwa, and it was once an economic powerhouse during the medieval ages. It oversaw all gold moving through East Africa, where it ruled on the coast of Swahili. Even more interesting is that it was a product of 3 distinct cultures: African, Arabian, and Persian. The remains of the abandoned city can still be seen to this day, clustered about a mile from the coast of Tanzania. There's not much left of it, the broken structure of a great mosque and the ruined fragments of a palace. But it's still an interesting reminder of the days when Africa was a truly rich kingdom. The local inhabitants were descendants of the Bantu and had a mixed language that included words from Persia and Arabia. The place was originally settled in the 4th century AD by small-time traders, but within 400 years, as Muslim traders moved in and out of the region, the city grew to its height. A great mosque was built, and everything was going just swell. Believe it or not, it thrived until the 16th century. It wasn't until Portugal showed up, occupied the city, and made it one of their own colonies that the city was lost. The Portuguese did so much damage that Kilwa was ultimately abandoned. No one has lived there since. Number 9. An ancient shipwreck. A team of archaeologists with Parks Canada made the incredible discovery of an abandoned shipwreck left frozen in time in the Northwest Passage. The ship is called the HMS Terror, and it left England almost 200 years ago on an expedition to find a shorter trade route from England to China. The voyage was led by Sir John Franklin, but clearly it didn't go very well. The ship, along with its sister ship HMS Erebus, got stuck in the ice near King William Island. The crews of both ships abandoned them to the ice and tried to find civilization. Unfortunately, they never did, and instead died from scurvy, resorted to cannibalism, went completely insane, and suffered miseries you wouldn't believe. Now, for the first time, archaeologists have discovered the abandoned ships and even dived down into the frigid waters to get a good look at them. Amazingly, they're in the exact same shape they were 170 years ago. Lead archaeologist Ryan Harris told National Geographic it was as if no time passed at all. The only issue is that they're still stuck in the ice, and there's really no hope right now of bringing them back to the surface. Number 8. Jordan's Underwater Military Museum. There is a bizarre underwater military museum in the country of Jordan. It's located just beneath the Gulf of Aqaba in the Red Sea, filled with over 19 abandoned military machines. These relics of war are stationed along the coral reefs in tactical formation. The exciting underwater museum is now luring curious divers and snorkelers from around the world to check out a very unique experience. The way in which the underwater museum was created is quite fascinating. They didn't just throw a bunch of abandoned war machines in the water and see what happened. They had to do scanning, planning, and create blueprints. Then when they were ready, they had to scuttle each of the 19 military items in a single week. They also had to make sure that dumping the tanks and other weapons of war didn't disturb the local marine life. Now they have an entire army platoon stationed on the seafloor, waiting for a battle that will never come. Would you like to take a dive and see this in person? Let us know in the comments below. Number 7. Disney's Abandoned Island. Disney World's Discovery Island has been abandoned since 1999. It was originally called Treasure Island, located in Disney World's Bay Lake. At 11 acres large, the island opened in 1974 as a zoo. There were over 130 species of animals living here, including extremely rare creatures like Galapagos tortoises and ring-tailed lemurs. But in 1999, the park fell out of favor. Employees were accused of beating birds with sticks, and it was a huge fiasco. The place has been abandoned ever since. But that didn't stop a man in 2021 from breaking into Disney World, which had been closed since the middle of March, and trying to live on the abandoned island. The 42-year-old man is from Alabama. He told deputies after his arrest that he was unaware he was trespassing. He thought the island was a tropical paradise. According to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, he has since been charged with 1 count of trespassing. He's also been banned from ever stepping foot on another Disney property. What could have compelled a man to do something so strange? He apparently broke in thinking he would stay for a week on the island like it was some kind of tropical resort, but he was spotted by Disney security. The sheriffs showed up in helicopters, in boats, and on foot, and in the end, he was dragged away to jail. Number 6. Abandoned British Mental Hospital. 2 men investigating a scary abandoned mental hospital in Britain say they encountered a ghost. As hard as that may be to believe, it's what they say happened. These 2 guys were exploring the ruined halls of the Rosslyn Lee Hospital in Edinburgh, a Scottish psychiatric institute founded in 1874. Its entire purpose was to provide medical care for patients who suffered from severe mental issues, but it closed in 2011, was abandoned, and left to decay. Ever since, it became a popular spot for urban explorers to look for ghosts. What's really interesting is that the hospital was actually pretty nice while it was open. It had its own water supply, patients were allowed to grow their own vegetables to supply their food, and it was really quite peaceful. It wasn't until the place was abandoned that it took on a more sinister appearance. Now the building is gloomy, the paint is peeling, and it's covered in weird graffiti. Jamie Osborne and Michael Cosgrove said that when they broke in to explore, the air just past the threshold was suddenly cold. Despite it being summer, they could see their breath. And it was as they were wandering through the halls that they allegedly saw a figure dressed in white looming over them. But according to them, they didn't stick around to look at it. They saw her, looked at each other, and then ran out the doors and haven't gone back since. Would you be brave enough to wander through an abandoned insane asylum? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. Bunker in the Garden. In England, a homeowner was carrying out a renovation when he discovered an abandoned bunker from the war in his garden. Chris Scott couldn't believe his eyes when he smashed through a drain cover in his backyard and found himself staring into the darkness of an underground hole. The hole was in fact a massive bunker with 2 rooms protected by concrete walls. It also had 2 escape hatches in case the bunker was discovered by the enemy. But who in the world built this thing, and why was it abandoned? That's become the real mystery. Chris believes the bunker may have been a secret hideout utilized by people living in the street during World War II. They probably used the bunker to protect themselves from the bombs being dropped by German planes, but it was abandoned after the war. The previous homeowner completely forgot about it, and its history was lost. Number 4. Mennonite Tombstones. In Ukraine, in the small city of Zaporizhia, the demolition of an abandoned building led to the discovery of over 100 mysterious Mennonite tombstones. The tombstones had been used as foundation building blocks for the derelict structure. The demolition workers were removing rubble from a destroyed brick barn when they found 4 layers of tombstones. What makes them so fascinating is that these abandoned grave markers were once memorials to people whose direct descendants now live in the Canadian province of Manitoba. This is actually pretty complicated. The grave markers have the names of Mennonites on them from a Mennonite cemetery that was destroyed by the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Most of these Mennonites actually migrated to Canada instead of bowing down to the Soviet Union prior to World War II. The Soviets killed plenty of Ukrainians after the Russian Revolution a century ago, and Canada basically opened its doors to any who wished to escape. The tombstones must have been pillaged by the remaining villagers, used as foundation blocks, and then only discovered now when the abandoned structure was torn down. Number 3. Too many snakes. In an abandoned house in Bradford, Canada, a man stumbled upon something truly gruesome. It all started when his neighbor noticed his house was stinking. There was a terrible stench wafting out the windows. The neighbor contacted the owner, who came by the next day to find that his tenants had abandoned the property with no warning. They simply picked up and left. When the homeowner traced the horrible stench through the house, he found 3 plastic containers. 2 were holding dead pythons, and 1 held a dead rattlesnake. The homeowner didn't know what to think, so he called the police and the SPCA. They sent their own investigators to the house and discovered a 4th python. This one's still alive. It was taken to a local veterinarian who thankfully managed to save the serpent's life. As for the horrible tenants who abandoned the house and their snakes, an investigation is still ongoing to bring them up on charges of animal abandonment. Number 2. Secret Gold Mine. Adam Palmer has spent the last 10 years of his life searching for a secret gold mine abandoned in the BC mountains. The gold mine is a part of an old legend, one that supposedly comes complete with a curse. Adam hasn't spent every waking moment searching for the mine, but he does spend a significant portion of each summer prowling the mountains near Pitt Lake in search of Slumax gold. Through all his hunting, he never found a single piece of evidence that the mine even exists. That is, until now. Adam believes that in a remote alpine meadow about 35 miles from Vancouver, the remnants of an abandoned log cabin is proof that the mine really is there somewhere. He believes the abandoned log cabin he found was once home to a prospector named Slumac, who had been mining the secret gold. However, he still hasn't found the mine itself. Why is it so important to find? Because the legend says that the mine is worth billions. Prospectors through the decades have died trying to find it. Some have gone missing, and those who believe in it think it's cursed. Number 1. Untouched for 40 years. The Marion Carl farmhouse has been sitting abandoned on Long Island for the past 40 years. The lovely Victorian property hasn't had an outside visitor in 4 decades until photographer Brian Sansevero was given exclusive access. The district allowed him to go in and peek around a bit. What he discovered was an amazing piece of history frozen in time. The farmstead dates all the way back to 1701, but the house itself wasn't built until the Civil War in 1860. The house didn't get its name until Marion Carl, born in 1885, had already been living in it for decades. She was a renowned teacher who founded the first local PTA program and had a school named after her in 1957. When she died in 1968, she handed her enormous farmhouse over to the school board. But alas, they abandoned it. As everybody is probably aware, school boards don't exactly have unlimited funding. The 1990s saw the place fall into serious disrepair because the school board couldn't pay to maintain or repair anything. Now the house is creepy and empty, filled with Marion's abandoned belongings as if she walked out the door in the 1800s and never returned.
Number 10. The Eilean Lighthouse. There is an abandoned lighthouse in Scotland hiding a terrible secret. The secret goes back to December 26, 1900. A ship made its way to the lighthouse at Eilean in the Outer Hebrides. Aside from the lighthouse keeper stationed there, the island was completely uninhabited. The ship was carrying the replacement lighthouse keeper. He was supposed to take over for the trio of men who had been looking over the lighthouse in the months prior. But when the ship arrived, the replacement lighthouse keeper was shocked to find that nobody was there. Not a single person was in the lighthouse. Nobody was anywhere to be found on the island. There was no sign of what had transpired. The only real clue came from the lighthouse log entries. One of the last logs detailed a severe storm, the likes of which the keepers had never seen before. The same entry claimed that one of the keepers had been unusually quiet, while the third assistant had been weeping. Nobody was ever able to make sense of this, especially because there were no reported storms in the area. To this day, no trace of the keepers has ever been found. Nobody knows what happened out there on the island of Eilean. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments. Number 9. Rotting corpses. At a creepy abandoned church in Ohio, authorities discovered the very last thing you would ever expect to be in a place of worship. We have to warn you now, it's pretty disturbing. Authorities investigating the abandoned church in Akron discovered the cremated remains of nearly 100 people. This is the Greater Faith Missionary Baptist Church, where Pastor Shante Harden mishandled the corpses of his congregation. The eerie discovery came thanks to a pair of urban explorers who wanted to peek around in the creepy church. But it turned into something neither of them had expected when they found dozens of boxes of ashes stashed in the abandoned property. Some of the dates went all the way back to 2010. Agents with the Ohio Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation seized the remains and investigated. They connected the corpses to the pastor. He had allegedly been running a funeral service out of the abandoned building, but it looks like it was a con, seeing as he wasn't actually burying anybody. He was running an illegal and unlicensed funeral home. Instead of hosting funerals, this guy was just stashing all the dead people in the decrepit church. Families trusted this guy to bury their loved ones, and instead, he just stacked them up and left them there. And to make matters just a little more disturbing, he may have been living inside the building as well, next to all those dead people. Number 8. Creepy Mansion. There is a beautiful and strange abandoned mansion built in 1925 hiding deep in New York's Catskill Mountains. The family who originally lived here were part of an Italian-American clan, but little else is known about them. We know that they left the property vacant for unknown reasons shortly after moving in, and it's been abandoned ever since. There have been attempts throughout the decades to sell the property, but nobody has ever purchased it, and so it's been reclaimed by nature. But here's the creepiest thing about the mansion. Inside, it's decorated as if by circus performers. It's beautiful and old on the outside, but the interior is full of striped wallpaper, rooms painted in yellow and blue diamonds, and there are colorful croquet balls all over the damaged floor. No one has a single clue as to why the mansion was decorated to look like the inside of a circus tent, and nearly 100 years later, we still don't know why it was abandoned in the first place. Number 7. The Ghost Mansion. The Ghost Mansion, also known as Via de Vecchi, is a mysterious summer residence built by an Italian count back in 1854. But after just a few years after being completed, the house was plagued by tragedies and abandoned. First of all, the owner of the house, Count Felix de Vecchi, was the head of the Italian National Guard. He was considered a hero for his help in liberating Milan from Austrian rule back in 1848. He built the house as a dream retreat for himself and his family, but a year before the house was completed, the architect in charge of creating it died. This was the first bad omen. Several years later, the Count came home one day to find that his wife had been brutally murdered and his daughter had been kidnapped. He never did figure out who killed his wife, and he was never able to find his missing daughter. After a lengthy search, the Count died later the same year. The house passed on to his brother. The family continued to live on the grounds until World War II, and then it was abandoned for good. It's still sitting in the middle of nowhere today, a creepy old ruin filled with the ghosts of the Count's family. Number 6. Haunted School. The Lilsden School for Girls in England is purportedly haunted. The abandoned building started as a mansion but was later purchased by a banker named Edward Lloyd. This was in the 1800s. When World War I came along, the building was converted into a hospital. Dozens of wounded soldiers were taken care of here, and many lost their lives. When the war ended, the mansion became a school for young girls. By 1975, segregated schools weren't popular anymore, and the building became an ordinary school. But it closed its doors in 1999 and has been empty ever since. What kind of secrets is this ghoulish school hiding? According to those who visit, the answer is ghosts. Ghost hunters and urban explorers alike have reported seeing the phantoms of young children prowling the halls. Whether these ghosts belong to students who died on the property or not, nobody can say for certain. All we know is this place is creepy. If you were ever brave enough to explore it at night, you could run into the ghost of a little boy or girl. Do you think you would ever be brave enough to spend a night in this haunted school? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button before the end of this video. Number 5. Pablo Escobar's Secret Island. Pablo Escobar is long dead and gone, but the man's legacy remains as a curse on the nation of Colombia. His reign of terror has also affected the Caribbean. In the middle of the Caribbean Sea, on a secret island that you may never have heard of, Pablo Escobar still has one of his mansions rotting away in the jungle. The island is called La Isla Grande, home to about 800 locals. These people don't actually do much except fish and farm, and are pretty cut off from our modern world. Still, the island caught the attention of Pablo Escobar. He loved it so much that he built his own palace on the far side, secreted between the Caribbean Sea and the tropical forest of the interior. This is a palace by every definition. It's fit for a king, even if that king was a known drug lord. The massive complex has waterfront apartments, a swimming pool, a landing pad for a helicopter, and over 300 rooms for his guests. There were even gold shower heads in the bathrooms. But these days, it's only accessible by walking for hours through the Caribbean forest. It's been abandoned for decades. It has gradually been breaking down as the wild island reclaims it. Number 4. The Chakala Ski Resort. The Chakala Ski Resort was the highest of its kind. Located in Bolivia, this ski resort stood at a whopping 17,519 feet above sea level. For a ski resort, it was higher up than the northern base camp of Mount Everest. It had a beautiful restaurant, recognized by the Guinness World Records as the highest restaurant on the planet. It originally opened in the 1930s, and the local Bolivians flocked to its slopes for 8 months out of the year. People even visited from all over the globe. But like all good things, the ski resort came to an end. Its decline started in the 1990s when scientists at a nearby laboratory began to make some pretty scary predictions. They said the glacier would be gone by 2015, but it actually vanished by 2009, a glacier over 18,000 years old. The resort had no other choice but to shut down when the ice and snow was gone. After all, you can't really ski if there's no snow. All that remains of the ski resort today are the ghostly ruins of buildings perched on the edge of a barren mountain without a drop of snow. The only secret still being kept here is that the great warming is coming. Pretty soon, places like Mount Everest could suffer the same fate as the world's highest ski resort. Number 3. The Lennox Castle Hospital. The Lennox Castle Hospital can be found near Glasgow, Scotland. Even though it attracts visitors from all over the world who are fascinated by its aged exterior, many of them don't know the secret truth inside the structure. It was designed in 1837 by architect David Hamilton. It was built in the Norman style over a period of only 4 years. The first owner was John Lennox Kincaid, who lived there with his family. But during World War I, the castle was converted into a military hospital. The real strangeness came when the war was over. In 1925, the Glasgow City Council turned the castle into a psychiatric hospital. It became the Lennox Castle Certified Institution for Mental Defectives in 1936. It was a terrifying combination of a weathered castle from the 1800s and the cruel practices of mental health care in the 1930s. There can't be anything worse than getting a lobotomy in the dungeon of an actual castle. After World War II, the mental defectives, as they called them back then, were kicked out, and the castle was turned into a maternity hospital. It reached its peak in 1970, and in 1980, it started to deteriorate. The castle was in horrible condition and was eventually abandoned. Nobody's taken care of it since, allowing it to slowly demolish itself. Number 2. The Mine in the Hills. Visitors to Cape Breton's Gypsum Mine Trail don't always realize that the enormous lake at the heart of the trail is in fact an abandoned gypsum mine. It looks like a natural lake in the center of some splendid hills, with nothing to see for miles but untouched greenery. But the secret truth is that the lake is a flooded gypsum mine from 1907. The gypsum located in these mountains was found by a prospector in the year 1897. At the time, there was a small village here whose inhabitants fished for their livelihoods. But the mine came in 1907. Machinery and thousands of tons of equipment were brought in the next year, and they even built a track for a steam locomotive to haul out all the gypsum. Everyone in the town got filthy rich. The mine continued to operate until 1939, when the transport ships and workers needed to be transferred to the war effort. It sat abandoned ever since, going on 80 years now. This used to be torn up land, dirty and full of pollution, but water has filled the mine up and trees have regrown along the pillaged hillsides. Number 1. Abandoned Missile Silo. In the countryside of Kansas, there is an abandoned nuclear bunker complex that was designed and built in the 1960s. Its silos were intended to hold the decommissioned Atlas F missiles, which were deployed from between 1961 and 1965 before they became outdated. The missile silo spans 11 acres of land and burrows about 170 feet beneath the earth. The entire complex was designed to withstand a direct hit from an enemy's missile, withstanding a blast force of 200 pounds per square inch. It was one of the very first super-hardened missile silos ever created, and yet you'd never know it was here. The secret is that it's pretty much all underground. The entrance to the bunker is through a single door sticking out of the ground like a concrete barricade. The only other sign that this was once a missile silo is the Quonset hut standing near the entrance, and the barbed wire fence that surrounds the whole place. Would you dare spend the night in an abandoned mine in the hills? Let us know in the comments section down below, and thanks so much for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button for all the most interestingly creepy videos on the internet. See you soon. Bye.